For the people that
There we go.
missed the time.
Yeah. So welcome everybody to the Fashion Revolution #Revolt. There we go. I said it correctly. I was having lunch. Everybody's having lunch. No problem. Welcome. So we're really excited to have you all here to help make a difference in changing or pushing the education around fashion, around supply forward, and getting kind of the word out there. So that's the goal. Come on, go to the next one. Yep. I'm having so many issues with technology today, y'all. 1 second. There we go. Check on my. That's fine. For someone who works in tech, I have the ability to make tech not work all the time. There we go. All right, so Fashion Revolution #Revolt, welcome. So this is our agenda. It's a very sort of loose, open style of hackathon for this event, as opposed to our usual, you're stuck in a room for 3 days and your brain melts by the end of it. This one's pretty open-ended and you can kind of work more on your own time. So today we're going to have our kickoff meeting. That's our first thing today for right now. The first event or the first kind of to do on our meeting today is going to be to meet your team. So while we were chatting here, I sneakily added your team role to your Discord person, Discord profile. There we go. So you should have seen a team channel for voice and for text pop up on your left sidebar there. And I'll do a quick walkthrough also of how Discord works and where everything is, just so that everybody is familiar. I know it's a platform that not everyone uses. We're going to talk through about selecting your message and selecting your audience, your platform, starting out how to plan your campaign. And then Neve Tuft from Fashion Revolution is going to talk at the end a little bit more about the goals of the Fashion Revolution and all of the different ways they're trying to change how corporations reveal their transparency about and how they think about transparency around their supply chain. So why are we here? And this was the long answer to that. That we're trying to educate those outside of the sustainable fashion sort of echo chamber. All of us who are here, we know that we need to bring about sustainability in fashion. We know that supply chain is sort of a big impact on that. And we know that fashion is something that we as consumers have a lot of power to change. We're really good at telling each other about that. We get together and chat about it a lot, I'm sure, but it's trying to get those people outside of those already in the know to believe that as well. And I think that's really interesting. I was talking to somebody recently about the idea of not only educating people, but getting them to believe in your goal with you. I can tell somebody until I'm blue in the face that it's important to know where your fabric comes from, where your clothes are manufactured and how they're manufactured, but getting people to really truly believe that that is something that's not only important, but something that they can change is that's where the challenge lies. So that's what we're here today, to try and get people to believe in the cause. Still, why are we here? Narrowing it down, kind of boiling it down a little bit more, like I was saying there. The end goal of all of it is trying to create a global fashion industry, conserves and restores the environment, and values people over profit and growth. At What the Heck, we do a lot of, or all of our initiatives really are focused around this idea of people, planet, profit. So we're having this triple bottom line of not only are we going to be a profitable industry, but we're going to help people and we're going to help the planet. And if we can't quite yet get to the point where we're helping people, where we can be giving back into the community or into the environment, then we're at the very absolute least not going to hurt people or the planet. So trying to push fashion towards that same idea of the triple bottom line: people, planet, profit. And because of that people side, and the people and planet side in particular, again, comes back to that supply chain part of it. That's really where the big negative impacts are coming in. And the end goal, or the kind of specific goal of the event or of the education, is to try and push corporations to be truly and fully transparent about their manufacturing process, materials, and practices. So as I was saying, fashion is one of those industries, as we all know, that the consumer, we have a lot of power. We can determine what is fashionable. We can make something fashionable. We can make something unfashionable. And making corporate transparency a fashionable thing is the goal. Trying to make that as opposed to the look of a piece of clothing, or the newness of a piece of clothing, the thing that people want to show off or want to brag about to their friends. The end goal, or like the ideal, I was thinking about the other day, instead of showing off that your dress has pockets, we'll talk about that it's completely sustainably sourced, and I know exactly where it was made and where it was transported. So transparency can be the new pockets. Your goals for this event, so for the next 3-ish days, by Tuesday afternoon, you're to run a social media campaign. It's kind of your brief, your challenge, if you care to accept it, to run a social media campaign that educates people, as we were saying, and pushes them towards believing about the importance of holding corporations accountable, making them transparent about their supply chain process. To do that, this is how you're going to kind of be judged. I hate for this one to say we're going to have a winner, because we're all helping and we're all winners, but the end goal, the challenge, is to reach as many people as possible in 24 hours. So that can be measured through, or that will be measured through your views, your clicks, likes, shares. Kind of will depend on what platform it's from. But whoever can have as much interaction and spread as in their campaign as possible. And we'll talk a little bit tomorrow about how you're going to present that on Tuesday. You'll have kind of a template deck, because I want you guys to focus on making that campaign as opposed to creating a pitch. So I'll make you'll have a template deck, and you'll just fill in the information so that the judges will be able to see it for Tuesday. Cool. Any questions so far? I tend to ramble really fast. So I'll pause for a moment and see if there's any questions so far. Yeah.
What platforms are we targeting?
You're allowed to use any one you want.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about that later.
Okay, right.
You get to pick. Cool. Any other questions? Awesome. All right. So our first, let me stop sharing this real quick and switch. So the first thing I want you guys to do is to meet your team. So let me show you very briefly our beautiful Discord server, if you haven't seen it yet. So I have sort of super admin version, so I have a lot more going on. Yours will be a bit more calm than mine. Over here on the left-hand panel, you have your different channels. So you'll have a general one, your team, and then these are your voice channels. You have a general and a team down there as well. Only your team can see into your team channel. It's a private one, so don't worry about anybody being able to spy on your chats or anything like that. Within the text one, you can send messages similar to like a Slack chat. You can also add documents if you want to share documents or share different information that way. You just click add and select which one you want to add. And then in the voice channels, I won't click into it now because it'll do some horrible echo thing, but it will open you into a video chat similar to this. And the last one is the general one. I'll put information that's relevant to everyone here. So this will be announcements, anything that everyone needs to know, and I tag it as everyone. And so you'll get an extra loud ping when I add something that everyone should know about. Any questions? Has everybody here gotten into the Discord and everybody's all set to go? I think we have everybody. Awesome. Cool. Okay, so your first kind of order of business is I want everybody to meet their teams. So if you can either pause this, just turn your camera and your microphone off and click into your general channel, or you can sign completely out. Sophie and I will be hanging out here, so it'll be the same link again. We'll take about 10 minutes. And if you'll just hop into your team general channel, introduce yourselves to each other. You can share a bit about your background and come up with a team mascot. It's just a fun thing to do. So don't stress about the team mascot. It's not for points. It's not going to affect anything. It's just sort of a fun way for us to get to meet you guys a bit and for you guys to meet each other. Usually we have, we'd say, something that's on your desk because it's right there. And you have it. Mine, for example, I have, oh, there it goes. I have Stretchy Steve. He's my stress thing. So that's my mascot every time. So we'll say 10 minutes. So about 2:30 we'll come back and drop into your channels, introduce your teams or introduce yourself to your teams. And then I will shout at you in the general channel when it's time to come back to the Zoom. So we'll see you again in about 10 minutes. Thanks, everybody.
Everyone. So what I'm going to talk through is the Fashion Revolution Week campaign, and then a campaign around what's in my fabric, which is looking at beyond tier 1 transparency in the supply chain. So if you don't know about tiers, don't worry, I'm going to talk that through, and then I'll briefly recap on #Revolt, which, as you all know, is being led by our US team. But just very briefly, a little bit about myself. I'm Neve, and I'm the global network manager at Fashion Revolution. So my job is to support and coordinate the teams, voluntary teams we have around the world in 92 different countries. So as you might have been seeing on Instagram, a lot of the activity is global activity. Our teams are hosting events, campaigns, and activations throughout the week, and many of them are active throughout the year as well. So yeah, let's start with what is Fashion Revolution Week? So Fashion Revolution Week was conceived on the first anniversary of the Rana Plaza collapse, which was one of the biggest industrial tragedies in the fashion industry's ever seen. It killed over 1,000 people and injured many more. And so each year we mark the anniversary of Rana Plaza with Fashion Revolution Week. Our mission at Fashion Revolution is to work towards and contribute to a fashion industry that conserves and restores the environment and values people over growth and profit. So that comes into everything we do. And I just got a few statistics to share with you to kind of put that into context. So the fashion industry is currently 50% behind the target needed to mitigate climate change as an industry. So there's a real need for urgent change in the industry. And of course, we have always put people and planet as completely interdependent. So we don't look at just the environmental impacts of fashion or just the social impacts, because they're interconnected and a part of each other. So for us, human rights and the rights of nature both need equal attention. It takes between 10% and 100% of the weight of a fabric in chemicals to produce that fabric. So once we start thinking about fabric, which we'll come back onto when we talk about who made my fabric, it's a very resource intensive and extractive industry. When we're thinking about materials, we can also think about the impact of plastics. A lot of people kind of normal citizens and consumers may not realize how much plastic is used in the fashion industry. If you have clothes that are polyester, nylon, they're made from plastic, and therefore they're made from petrochemicals is their base. So, and of course that plastic is has nowhere to go unless it's being recycled, and as we can see, less than 1/10 of the plastic that's been produced in the last 70 years has been recycled. So yeah, as I mentioned, we focus both on human rights and on the rights of nature. So we have always had a strong focus on the social impacts of fashion. We were born with Who Made My Clothes, asking about to make the people behind fashion visible to citizens, and for them not to be obscured and opaque. But we also know that the fashion industry depends on the environment, it depends on the land, and 35% more land would be required for fibre production by 2030, and this is a real threat to biodiversity, and it results in habitat loss. So next week will be Fashion Revolution Week, our 8th Fashion Revolution Week, and it happens between Monday and Sunday. So there will be hundreds of events going on around the world, mostly digital, some physical as well. So you might catch a few in your location if it's COVID secure and safe. But otherwise, there's lots of digital events going on around the world across Instagram lives, YouTube lives, and lots of Zooms as well. So our key messaging for this year, just to take you through it, I've kind of touched on it in the introduction there, is rights, relationships, and revolution. So what we're coming back to, it has been always part of our message, but we're coming back to the idea that human rights and the rights of nature are interconnected and interdependent, that we as humans are part of a wider living world, and our right to a healthy environment depends, of course, on the health of our planet. The fashion industry results in human exploitation and ecosystem degradation, and that's a product of centuries of colonialism and globalized exploitation. We can't continue to extract resources from an already stressed natural environment. We can't continue to pollute our land and our oceans, and we can't continue to fall short of climate change targets and dump our waste on countries who we've already culturally or economically depleted. And we can't allow big business to profit while supply chain workers struggle to live with dignity. At Fashion Revolution, we believe we need a radical shift in the relationships, not only with each other, but with our clothes and within the fashion supply chain, but also with the natural world. And we need that for our own well-being. We need that for the health of our earth and the health of our oceans. So we call on environmentalists, human rights groups, industry, governments, unions, and citizens to work together to uphold human rights and the rights of nature. And as we know, fashion is made from nature. It's made from natural resources, whether that be wood pulp that goes into viscose, or whether it be petrochemicals that are going into our polyester and our nylon, or cotton, hemp, silk. And what we'll be focusing on is that human right to a healthy environment is enshrined in many constitutions. There's some very interesting legislation coming up as well around the rights of nature and how the rights of nature can be protected. And then, yeah, moving on to the fabric and fiber level, we're trying to build awareness of the impacts of not only buying clothes, but caring for them, and what we can do within our own wardrobes to create change. So the hackathon is kind of connected to a project that the Fashion Revolution USA team are running, which is called #Revolt. And that is focusing in on some brands that were part of a piece of research that we did last year and that we published last year. So in a sense, it's tangentially connected to this this campaign, which we're running for the first time this year, where we ask not just who made my clothes, but who made my fabric. And so we're looking at transparency from field to fabric, not just in the cut, make, trim process, so not just at the product stage. Okay. There we go. And so, yes, we've produced a piece of research called Out of Sight, looking specifically at this for 62 brands, and that's in partnership with the Tamil Nadu Alliance. So based in India, there's a coalition of civil society networks representing about 100 grassroots organizations who are working to improve the conditions of workers in the textile supply chain in the region. And they launched a declaration and a framework of action last year. We're supporting goal 1 of that declaration by asking brands and retailers to expand supply chain transparency beyond tier 1 manufacturing facilities. And that's about public disclosure of textile spinning mills in Tamil Nadu and their supply chains. So by making this information public, workers and civil society organizations are able to identify and connect with international businesses that are sourcing from those spinning mills to improve their working conditions. So connected to this report, which was published in October 2020, we're now for Fashion Revolution Week launching a social media campaign to encourage consumers and citizens to demand greater transparency from brands beyond that first tier of manufacturing by asking who made my fabric, not just who made my clothes. The campaign calls upon 62 major global brands and retailers to disclose those processing facilities and textile mills. So yeah, beyond the product and down into the fabric, the fiber, and the raw material stage. And what we aim to do with that is to make more visible the unsafe and exploitative conditions that are happening at tier 2 and beyond. So this is where the campaign, the Who Made My Fabric campaign, came from. And just to give a quick overview of what's in that report. So it's called Out of Sight, a call for transparency from field to fabric. And we found the findings from that, the major findings were that 46 out of those 62 major brands and retailers are disclosing their first tier manufacturers. So that's where finished product goods are made and shipped. Just 23 are disclosing at least a partial list of beyond tier 1, so processing facilities like printing, dyeing, laundering, embroidery. Just 18, so 31%, were disclosing a partial list of textile production sites. This is spinning, knitting, weaving, fabric production. And just 1 was disclosing all of its textile production sites, and that was Nudie Jeans, which you can read in the report. The rest of the brands were disclosing very partial information, and what we're asking now is that they begin to disclose all of their processing facilities going forward. And so that's where this citizen call to action aims to put pressure on those brands to do so. And we're doing it through a number of methods. So one method is through social media activism. One is through emailing a brand as their customer, and the other is through leaving product reviews with brands that you buy from, or you're interested in buying from, to ask them to disclose this information. So we're really excited about that method because it's a new method in our campaigning, so we're excited to see how it goes. So the way this connects with #Revolt is that the brands who are included in #Revolt are from that list of 62. So what the USA team have done is look at who has their own unique hashtag, so Boohoo Babes or Pretty Little Thing, and what they aim to do is target the customer of those brands by flooding with posts and information by using the hashtag. So trying to get a critical mass together on the campaign launch, which is 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So that's 2 o'clock our time on Monday. And they're not aiming to go with the Who Made My Fabric level because it's quite a sophisticated level of knowledge. So they're really looking at more simple education and pushing who made my clothes. So to try and encourage curiosity and awareness amongst those who are buying from these big brands. So to explain just a little bit in more detail why transparency beyond the first tier of the supply chain matters. So a lack of visibility of supply chains can allow exploitative, unsafe, and environmentally damaging conditions to thrive and obscure those who have the responsibility and the power to redress these issues. So for many years, there have been numerous reports of labour and human rights abuses in textile mills, informal workshops, tanneries, dye houses, farms and plantations around the world that supply materials to the global fashion industry. One that you might be aware of recently, which was very prominent in the press, was the Uyghur cotton scandal in China. But within the textile mills in Tamil Nadu, there is a high level of gender-based violence, as many of the workers are adolescent girls and young women. And they've been known to face excessive and involuntary overtime hours, physical and sexual abuse, and the restriction of movement, as well as extremely low wages. So public supply chain disclosure is really useful because it enables workers' rights and environmental advocates to identify, report, and redress these suspected abuses, and to do so potentially in collaboration with brands and retailers sourcing in those places. So the visibility deeper into the supply chain than tier one is also useful for brands and retailers because it helps them to better track and manage their social and environmental risks, which is obviously reputationally very important for their business. For consumers, these lists help to answer that question of who made my fabric. And you can read more about that in the report itself, in the Outside report. So our aim through the campaign for the week and hopefully beyond as well is to increase the citizen power in holding brands accountable by demanding supply chain transparency beyond that first tier of manufacture in order to increase visibility of the risks of human rights and environmental abuses. So consumers can get involved in a number of ways, as I mentioned, by emailing brands, by tagging brands on social media, or by leaving product reviews. And brands are very sensitive to those product reviews because obviously they're viewed by other customers as well who are visiting their e-commerce. So later in the year, we'll be extending the Who Made My Fabric campaign with an I Made Your Fabric campaign, and that will complement the next stage of the Out of Sight report, where we're looking at what the change has been in brands' behaviours and disclosure. But of course, Fashion Revolution is not just those of us who sit in front of our computers in London and around the UK, and also in our 92 country teams around the world. It's all of you as well. So thank you so much for being with us today and for getting involved in Fashion Revolution Week. We're a global movement made up of people from all across the fashion industry, all across the supply chain, and all across society. And we're the people who wear clothes, we're the people who make clothes. We're designers, academics, writers, business leaders, policymakers, brands, retailers, marketers, producers, makers, workers, fashion lovers, and creatives. We're the industry and we're the public, and we're world citizens. So we call on everyone to get involved. And of course, you're here because you are getting involved. If you want to extend beyond this hackathon and get involved more widely in Fashion Revolution Week, these are our kind of top 5 actions. You can ask brands who made my clothes, what's in my clothes, and who made my fabric on social media. And you can follow up further questions. You can invite a friend. We have an invite a friend tool on our website, so you can pop in their details and they'll get a pack and they'll be asked if they want to sign up for more Fashion Revolution updates. You can print out one of our 4 commissioned posters. We commissioned 4 great artists to create a poster to put in your window, which I must do myself this afternoon. That's my next job. And of course, you can attend an event. We have a whole program of digital events that you can find on our website, and also kind of impromptu events through Instagram lives and YouTube lives happening all over the world. So yes, ask a brand who made my clothes or who made my fabric. One thing that might be helpful, I think this has already been shared with you, but you can find our campaign toolkit on our website on the landing page, and that has all of our campaign ready-made campaign assets and our brand toolkit, which we open source there. So that's probably going to be helpful for your guys' next steps when you're creating content. Finally, we like this quote from Grazia, that Fashion Revolution Week is the only fashion week worth caring about. Does anyone have any questions? I'm here. I think we've got about 5-10 minutes. Is that right? Yeah, 5-10 minutes for questions.
If anybody has questions, feel free to shout out, or you can drop it in the chat if you're feeling shy.
Hi.
Yeah, Paula, go ahead.
Hi guys. Quick question. Are you using any blockchain technology in the transparency in the supply chain? Like, are you choosing which brands? I'm from the fashion AI and blockchain space, and was just wondering, because I did a TEDx talk 2016 on defining the undefined, educating an entire supply chain simultaneously to encourage sustainability. And that was the first time I learned about blockchains and how we have different parts of supply chains that are connected using technology, which will help us make decisions in real time about what kind of resources that we use. So the brands that you're talking about, I assume they're using blockchain for transparency, right?
Well, some brands use blockchain and some don't. I mean, actually, to my knowledge, usually the ones who are using it are the smaller brands rather than the biggest retailers. So connected to the out of sight report, we also have a bigger transparency index, which looks at the 250 biggest brands. It's called the Fashion Transparency Index, and it's published annually. It will be published in, I think it's end of June this year. And we don't use blockchain to trace them. It's a very manual process because it's looking at public disclosure. So I think really when we're talking about blockchain, we're talking a bit more about traceability, although of course that's connected to transparency. When we're looking at transparency, we're looking at what can a citizen access, or what could a worker access, or what could an activist or kind of workers' rights organization or NGO access that tells people about their supply chain. So I really recommend having a look at the Fashion Transparency Index and having a read of the executive summaries, because that will give you a kind of a broader overview of those 250 major brands and retailers. But there's quite a lot of innovation, as you're kind of talking about, going on often in more kind of R&D and smaller brand environments that is using technology. So there's been some really interesting examples, and there's one at the moment around swapping. So using blockchain to trace like swapping, and that's by Lablico and the guys behind Global Fashion Exchange. So they're piloting that at the moment and testing that in the swapping environment, as opposed to, you know, a kind of a supply chain one. And yeah, there's been a lot of small designers and smaller brands using blockchain. In fact, back in the early 2000s, I think it would be now, Carrie Summers, who's one of our founders, kind of pioneered GPS technology so that she could have traceability of every artisan who was producing for her brand. Her brand's a Panama hat brand. So yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting space, and it sounds like,
well, I'm just going to be realistic. I'm also from the retail background. 20 years in the business, and I've been to Paris Chanel Fashion Week, and I'm an old fashion horse, 43 now. What I want to say to you is, unless you have technology, accountability, and transfer, like, I think it's ridiculous if you don't have the right technology to enable sustainability. I think you're banging your head off a wall. I think everything should be measured, accountable, and I think we should be using technology, both the providers on the fashion supply chain, but also the users. So the more access we have to data, the easier
and
it is
the worker
decisions on the different kinds of decisions that are being made inside the fashion supply chain. And that's talking 23 years of experience.
I think with technology, and this is very much a personal opinion of mine, like who has access to the technology and who has the power in the technology. So for me, technology is most interesting when it's put in the workers' hands or in the makers' hands, and that isn't really happening. And there's a really interesting
project. My TED talk was about the digital divide And that's something that I'm working towards actually as well. The
And
digital divide.
digital exclusion and digital literacy
Absolutely.
as well. Because of course, like, I mean, we're talking about places like Bangladesh or Ethiopia, data charges for the individual are incredibly high. So can people even access, so for example, we produce a producer get involved pack and a union get involved pack. Can people even access that because of, you know, kind of data sharing, and then therefore how do you use technology in an accessible way? There's a really fascinating project, not at all connected to the fashion industry, but it was run by Strelka Design Institute in Russia with the truck drivers union of Russia, because they all have to have dash cams for insurance purposes. So it is the truck drivers union themselves that owns basically the Google Maps of Russia, not a private entity, not a technology company, but the truck drivers union. And I think that's a really interesting example to apply to the fashion space. Who owns these tools? Who has the ownership of the data? And there's a power in that, and that would be a really interesting space to explore.
100% agreed. Yeah, I definitely think, because how will I say, the consumers now with blockchain, we have more power to put pressure on brands because we own our own data. So I think, guys, you know, working together with technology, you know, it's really going to help. We need to tell the brands, you know, what they need to be doing. We need to be telling them, well, this is the kind of clothes we want. This is the kind of materials that we want. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's too much. I think the user needs to be more involved in how clothes are made. And that's what kind of fueled me to stay in fashion. Because fashion for me is quite a dirty business. And I was like, God, you know, I was going to leave the industry. And then when I found you guys and I started looking into sustainability, and I was like, okay, I'm going to stay and see, you know, if I can find another place like technology for change. Exactly. Yeah.
I think for us, in whatever method it is, whether it's through technology, whether it's more lo-fi, whether it's more person to person, what we're interested in is connecting those who have the power to call for change, the citizen, the consumer, with those who need the change the most, to put pressure on those who can make the change and have the power to make the change. So we're interested in joining these hands across that length of the supply chain, from farmer to citizen, in order to pressurize both government and industry to make the changes that we need to see.
Yeah, cool.
Any other questions?
Yeah, any other questions? Yeah, Kavita, go for it.
Hi, I came across the Business of Fashion's their own sustainability index that they have on transparency. How different is it? Because I know that BOF is predominantly about supporting the fashion business and promoting it and growing it. And when they talk about a sustainability tracking index and versus yours, do you know what the differences are if I'm going to start looking into it?
Yes, broadly, although I haven't, because we're in the lead up to Fashion Revolution Week, I haven't had the chance to read the full report. Yeah, I do know broadly. I mean, it's a lot fewer brands. I think it's 30 brands in total that they're looking at. We look at transparency only because there's no globally recognized definition of sustainability for fashion. So they're looking at a broader range of metrics that for them make up sustainability. And they are looking across the luxury sector and the mass market. So are we. But yeah, their metrics are quite different. We have 250 indicators, 220 indicators across 250 brands, and they're really very much geared towards transparency. So we kind of see it as the first domino in a sequence: transparency, accountability, and then change. Whereas I think my impression of what the Business of Fashion are looking at is something kind of more holistic, but maybe less detailed on those indicators. So they're looking at a slightly more kind of holistic way of measuring sustainability. But yeah, I mean, I think this is the case also what the relationships are with brands, and we have to be incredibly careful with that with the Fashion Transparency Index. So we have to make sure that we're non-influenceable by those brands. So we have an ethical funding policy. We don't accept funding from those who fail that, and that requires a certain level of supply chain transparency. And of course, if a brand is included in the Fashion Transparency Index, be even, kind of even more careful around due diligence checking. So yeah, I mean, I think, we've had the same comments as Business of Fashion have had around, like, the way that these reports and indexes can be used to greenwash by brands. And that's something that is very complex space, because while we can produce the evidence and the information, how others then speak about it can be troubling. And I think, it's a similar thing for Business of Fashion, but it's driven by Sarah Kent, who's a fantastic journalist in this area and has been a kind of a follower and supporter of Fashion Revolution for many years. So I'm excited to read it when I get a chance. I've read the executive summary and some of the main details, but yeah, it's coming from a slightly different angle, I think.
Right. Okay. Because I was at the Fashion Summit, and it was very interesting that for an organization that promotes fashion and consumption, that they were talking about sustainability from a very holistic. But again, I was wondering, who's paying for all this and what's the
I don't know. We disclose our funders publicly, and I don't know if they have that in there. I mean, my understanding is that it's in partnership with McKinsey. So I would think that there are like resources at least coming from McKinsey. But yes, I mean, any fashion media, not just Business of Fashion, any fashion media, apart from super independent fashion media who don't place any adverts and advertorials, are all completely dependent on brand spend for their business model. And this is also a really interesting space. It's like, how can journalists critique and write about these brands when their salaries are paid by them? Yeah. And their editorials paid by them. So in a sense, we produce content and editorial, not fashion editorial, but we're able to have an independence because we're a non-profit.
Yeah. Okay. Can I ask, one of the frustrations for me from attending the summit was that a lot of the solutions that they talked about was aimed at big businesses, like massive brands, like people with buying power. Like, Mycelium is obviously available to Stella McCartney, but it's not available to everybody else, right? Those kind of massive differences. So as a very, very small, tiny person in this big pool of fashion brand, how would you go about navigating keeping your supply chain clean and trying to track and trace and make it more transparent?
For small businesses, for SMEs?
Yeah, for SMEs.
I think, well, we work with quite a lot of SMEs on our Fashion Open Studio program. So that's a program it's a transparency initiative in some senses, that we ask designers to open up their studios to a citizen public audience to answer questions and talk about how they work and how they source and what decisions they make. I think there's, kind of some key touch points. I mean, there are some tools that you can use, and there's obviously some certifications. Certifications are flawed and expensive, but there are, standards around traceability and transparency. But I think, the starting point is really like, what's the purpose and the mission, and building the entire kind of business model and structure around that. And of course, like asking yourself those questions, like, do you know who made the clothes that you're producing? How far down the supply chain can you get before you get a blocker and you're like, I don't actually know what's next. I don't know if that was hand stitched by someone in a domestic setting, or, so I think it's almost like just going as far down your supply chain as you can and asking your suppliers and wanting to hear the truth from them as well. Because I think there's probably quite a lot of fear about some of the disclosure and treating those relationships truly as partnerships. We hear a lot from big business calling their suppliers partners, and then we saw what happened in the pandemic where they cut off their suppliers. So I mean, what I would say about the Fashion Summit and things like the Fashion Transparency Index is, when we're looking at the biggest brands and retailers, they obviously they affect an enormous number of people and an enormous scale of the environment as well, which is why it's so important to turn them around. And there's an equally kind of big ecosystem when we add it all up of SMEs. But those brands affect so much the conditions within which the SMEs can operate as well, because they call the shots, right? Yeah. So as an SME, and when you're placing orders, you might be knocked out because a bigger brand comes along and places a bigger order and has more aggressive procurement and purchasing practices. So, you know, it's, if we can steer the big brands around, we're really talking about a systemic change in an industrial model. And
Yeah.
that's what we need in the fashion industry.
No, that is
Nope.
very true, because I read an article following the summit that Mycelium is available to people like Stella, and I think one more brand who has access to it, but because they are the ones who are investing in it, putting their money and time and effort to develop it as a product that's available for the mass market. So maybe in 10 years' time, it will be available widely.
And there's lots of things that are not scalable or replicable yet. So they're still in R&D, they're still in prototype. But
Yeah.
also I think we have to look at like this kind of model of, again, this kind of capitalist model of ownership, because if we've got a solution, why are we not open sourcing it? Why are we not sharing it? Why are we not collaborating with it? Why are we holding it on for our own commercial benefit? But
that is
you
not
know,
just in fashion, that's in everywhere. That's in
Yeah,
medicine,
everything.
that is in software coding, you know, that it happens in all industries. So.
And that's a major like narrative change and behavioral change and mindset change to go through. And I think, you know, some of the pioneers of that are the small businesses, because they're kind of saying, look, I made this amazing solution. I don't actually have the ability to scale it to its potential or to replicate it to its potential. So why doesn't everyone else get involved? And those kind of new business models that are underlying those kind of things, I think will be really fascinating to see how they develop in the next, 5 and 10 years.
Yeah, maybe need, would be a great business model or a great platform for you guys is to have some sort of platform where you give a space to small to medium-sized brands to participate in sustainability. So you would have access. You set up your own
studio. Yeah, we have a showcasing initiative. I'll put it in the chat, called Fashion Open Studio. There's about 60 events, all run by like small, innovative brands. There's also a forum on that website, which we're really trying to get going more so that a wider community can get involved. Yeah, and we're also just about to, super under wraps, launch a big European funded project, which focuses on accelerating SMEs across Europe into sustainable and circular models.
I run an AI and blockchain fashion accelerator at Trinity College Dublin. That's actually why I'm here. So at the moment, I have 9 use cases in AI. 3 of them are retail, but they're around NFT minting for social media content. What's the other one? Computer vision mapping for trying on.
Amazing. Well, this European project will have a big open call for transnational partnerships. It might be something that you'd be interested in applying for. But if you want to pop your details in the chat just to me directly, I can make sure that we put you on our mailing list.
Because I have, as you see, the next accelerator we're bringing in September, and I'm looking for sustainable fashion ones. So
amazing. Well, also connect with us on on Fashion Open Studio and pop it in the forum, because there's nearly 100 designers who've been involved in Fashion Open Studio from all around the world, but a lot from the UK and Europe as well. So yeah, sounds great.
That's why I'm here, guys. I'm looking to help you.
I feel like I've gone over time there.
No, you're fine. I'm more worried about you having to run a whole much larger event. But thank you for staying on and answering questions and continuing discussion. If people are looking to find you, to connect with you, where is best? LinkedIn?
Where is best? Yes, so I'm you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find my details on the fashionrevolution.org website. You can find me cheerleading our teams from around the world on Instagram. I don't do grid posts. I'm one of those terrible people who only does stories, but I post a lot of content from our teams because I just want to support them. So at the moment I have a full story of events from around the world. But of course, you can find Fashion Revolution at our website. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. And you can find Fashion Open Studio at Fashion Open Studio on Instagram as well. So, and it has its own microsite, which I posted there in the chat. So we are very multi-platform. Yeah, I'm sure you'll see us on every form of digital live event in the next week or so.
Which universities, I'm moving to the UK in 5 weeks, which universities are you cooperating with? At Nottingham?
Lots of different ones on different projects. So I'm working at the moment with the University of Portsmouth. We worked a lot with Central St Martin's and London College of Fashion. We've worked with Northumbria. We worked with Glasgow School of Art and Edinburgh College of Art in Scotland. We've worked with Manchester Met. Lots and lots. We have a sort of broad education network, and one of the members of our community interest company, we're a CIC, is an academic human geographer from the University of Exeter. So we have lots of connections, and we really try to work with students an awful lot, and obviously universities from the sort of research angle as well. So yeah, lots. I mean, I think
I'm
there's
going to be
about
tracking you guys.
50
I'll be stalking you.
there's about 50 fashion schools in universities in the UK, but of course fashion touches on economics, geography, technology, so yeah, a really broad range.
Awesome. We have a great network started already. It's always something I say, it's one of the things we love about these events, even the virtual ones. We build a network like that. So cool. Thank you, Neve, so much for coming on and sharing about the mission and all of the great work that you guys are doing. And
have a happy Fashion Revolution Week. We're really looking forward to seeing what comes out of the hackathon. I think my colleague Shannon from the US team is going to be joining on Tuesday, is it?
Yep.
And yeah, so look out at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is 2 a.m. our time, for the launch of #Revolt as well.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Right.
Teammate, bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. See you girls.
Participants, wait, don't leave yet. Participants, I have a few things to tell you really fast before tomorrow. So good work for the first sort of sprint of this kind of open-ended hackathon. So for tomorrow or for the rest of today, you're free to take a break. You're free to still continue working in your groups if you like. It's totally up to you. This one is the work time is really self-determined for this. We wanted to make it something accessible for busy folks. So if you want to, the way I would say, if you don't want to sit just in a meeting with each other or on a call with each other, to use that team text channel, there we go, and share your thoughts, and you can be real casual about it and do it from the park or anywhere that you like. Discord does have an app version for the phone, so I'm taking mine to the park, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that anybody has in the meantime. Tomorrow at tomorrow at 2 o'clock 2 o'clock Dublin time. So if that needs to be translated, it's 2 o'clock Dublin time. We'll come back together. We'll join up on the general channel on the Discord, and I'll put all of this as reminders in the Discord as well, so that you don't have to jump back and forth. We do the Zoom so I can share the slides, but tomorrow we have fewer slides, or we have no slides, so there's no need to jump back and forth to different platforms. Tomorrow you'll have meetings with mentors to get feedback on what you've decided for your structure of your campaign, for your media messaging, etc. So as I was talking about earlier, try and have a few options, and then Sunday night we will launch them so they run for that 24 hours over Monday. Sunday night into Monday night, midnight to midnight-ish. That is all I have. That's everything that we have for today. If there are any questions, you can drop them in the chat and I will answer, into the Discord chat and I will answer. And I think that's everything, unless anybody has any questions right now that are just burning desire. But so we ran a little over our 4 o'clock. So I want to let you guys get out and enjoy what's left of the sunny day, since I think it seems that everywhere is having sunshine for once. So go enjoy it.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
We'll see you all tomorrow. Great work today. I can't wait to see what you guys have come up with. So,
Yeah.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.